Driver interest and searches were on the rise, allowing carriers to generate more leads. Couple that with the fact that midway through the month, the CPL for June was down by 5%, and that has led to conditions becoming slightly more favorable, but overall trucking conditions are still pretty negative. We'll cover all the latest numbers and get you up to speed. We'll also take a look at the recent research from ATRI aimed at identifying and hopefully solving key issues keeping more women from becoming truck drivers. All that, plus we'll check in with Jason Miller for his updated take on the economy as a whole and find out if he's seeing any signs of improvement or is it just more of the same. Stay tuned and find out. For Randall Reilly, I'm Joshua Miller, and this is the 30-Day Reset. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the 30-Day Reset. We appreciate you joining us today. Every month, we're back to look at some of the latest recruiting, freight, and economic numbers. Now, if that sounds like something you'd be into and you haven't already, go ahead and click the subscribe button, turn on the reminders, and like the video. If you're watching us over on our YouTube page, that is. If you happen to be on our randallreilly.com page, you can also sign up for our monthly newsletter. We send that thing out at the beginning of every month with a sampling of some of our latest content. And last but not least, don't forget that if you want a copy of everything we go over today, including our news stories, freight, economic data, all that good stuff, you can download this month's edition of the 30-Day Reset. Details for that are down below, both on YouTube and our Randall Reilly site. Now let's get into this month's show. We'll kick things off with Trucking by the Numbers, brought to you by Strategize. As I touched on in the opening tease, driver interest appears to be on the rise. In May, there was a 10% increase in the number of people clicking on truck driver jobs on Indeed. And the number of job seekers per job shot up 16% month over month, which represents the second highest number on record. In addition to that, Google search activity was up 13% compared to May through the first half of June, and we saw a 9% increase in visits to Randall Reilly recruiting landing pages. And while all of this sounds good and does seem to represent at least some improvement in trucking conditions, the overall conditions remain negative for trucking companies, and FTR is predicting conditions will remain volatile for the next several months before calming down into Q4 and hopefully, possibly, finally turning the corner and becoming mildly favorable by the beginning of 2025. However, others predict no meaningful improvements will hit until at least Q2 of 2025. On the freight side of things, total load volume was down 11% year over year and 47% when you compare it to the 5-year average, while spot rates saw a year-over-year decline of just 0.1%. That's the strongest year-over-year comparison since June 2022. When it comes to the individual segments, dry van loads were down 13% year-over-year, as was flatbed loads, while refrigerated loads saw an increase of 4% compared to last year's load volume. As for spot rates, dry van came in with a year-over-year increase of 2%, refrigerated saw an 8.5% year-over-year increase, and flatbed saw a 2% decline. That 8.5% increase for refrigerated also represents the strongest year-over-year comparison since February of 2022. Now let's check out this month's news story. The American Transportation Research Institute, or ATRI, recently released some new research focusing on women drivers. More specifically, what issues face women and potentially prevent them from joining the industry. The goal being that if these key issues can be identified and addressed, that over time the number of women becoming drivers and remaining a part of the industry will increase. The research gathered input from thousands of truck drivers, motor carriers, and truck driver training schools through interviews and surveys. There was also a women truck driver focus group formed to help identify problem areas and create a strategy to address them. The full report identifies 6 key primary challenges that need to be overcome to increase the pool of women drivers in the industry. Those issues were: Number 1, negative industry perception. Number 2, an ongoing inability for potential women drivers to complete driver training. Factors in this include issues paying for training, lack of driving skills, a lack of or limited access to childcare, and excessive travel to and from school. Number 3, unsatisfactory company cultures within motor carriers. Number 4, inability to acclimate to the OTR lifestyle. Here, these things revolve around things like home time and difficulty establishing and maintaining healthy road habits. Number 5, lack of safe parking and restroom facilities. And number 6, gender harassment and/or discrimination. The full research fleshes out each of these issues more thoroughly, as well as trying to outline specific strategies to address each of the key issues. Professional truck driver for Prime Inc., Emily Plummer, had this to say: ATRI's research gives a voice to the thousands of women truck drivers who have found successful and satisfying careers in this industry, and encouragement to the other women to consider truck driving jobs. The research also notes that women are drawn to driving careers because of the income potential, which highlights the pay parity between men and women in the industry. Another finding was that companies that do specifically target women with recruiting and retention programs end up having more women drivers than others, 8.1% compared to the typical 5%. For more info on this topic, as well as the suggestions to combat the main issues, you can read the full story as covered by Truckers News and find full access to the report on ATRI's website. Links for both of those are included down below. Now for Jason Miller's Economic Update.
Welcome everyone to our June freight update, which really could be titled seemingly just sort of more of the same as we think about what's going on in the trucking space. And again, strong focus on that dry van truckload sector. So starting off where we're at in mid to late June, looking at DAT's spot rates with fuel surcharge as well as broker by contract rates. We've had about a 6-cent jump in that dry van spot rate from the low in April to where we're sitting at right now in June. But I don't want to get too excited just yet. The reason is our jump in June from May is, somewhere to the tune of 3 cents per mile. If you go back to 2017, that would have looked like 11 cents per mile. In 2018, it was 18 cents per mile. And even back in 2019, a bear market, it was 10 cents per mile. So this has been overall a fairly weak June in terms of seeing those dry van spot rates jump up. And where we're at in the market cycle, if we look at that relationship between broker buy contract rates and those dry van spot rates, the dry van spot market cycle indicator that I calculate from those two, we're right now about a 16.5% premium for the broker buy contract rates. What this suggests is we are nowhere near the market turning yet, because that typically is going to be around the 10th percentile or 10% threshold. And to get that, we would need a massive increase in dry van spot rates. And we're just not seeing that yet. And I think the reason why is it's a demand story still. So the trucking ton mile index that I co-author, right now, April was a seasonally adjusted drop again. I don't read too much into that because Easter was in March this year rather than April. So there's some mathematical complexity. So what I'm just seeing is we're still seeing freight demand just move along the bottom of this trough right now that we've really been in since, I'd say, late Q3 of 2023. So we're just moving along a trough right now without really any sense of some type of major shock that's going to take place to get us that surge of demand we need to push up those spot rates. And as we think of a couple sectors that can serve sort of as a bellwether for what's likely to come for trucking demand, one of those I've got shown on the left is inflation-adjusted investment in residential structures of all types. So this is new housing starts, this is apartment building starts, and this is also residential improvement activity. So folks building decks and things like that. What I want to highlight is if you take a look at that, dip with the COVID recession and then this explosion upward. We've talked so much about consumer spending as this catalyst for so much trucking activity come the second half of 2020. I'm increasingly starting to think we may want to slightly change that narrative and that it may have been a lot more of a housing boom in general. And we'll call it a residential investment boom, home improvement activity, new housing starts, apartment buildings getting built, et cetera. Because that activity jumped almost 20% in just a couple quarters, which is a huge increase. And you'll notice that came down very sharply in mid-2022, right when the freight recession began. Then the second sector is machinery production. So as you think about machinery being produced, that is a capital good that's being typically bought by other firms to use as part of their production processes. And what we've historically seen is periods of strong machinery demand, especially if you combine it with strong housing activity, tend to be a fairly good indicator of a good trucking market. So 2014, 2017 into 2018, you can see that sharp rise in machinery production, but then things dropped in 2019. Housing dropped in 2019 because of interest rates, and we had a freight recession. You'll notice that series goes up, it peaks in 2022, and it starts coming down. And so we're not seeing yet any signs that we're really getting out of this trough. And so this is, again, I think the story right now is freight demand seems essentially caught in a trough. We're about not even 5 months out from a very consequential presidential election, firms are not going to be wanting making big capital investment decisions right now, also not knowing how the FOMC is likely to move with interest rates. So my general take right now is 2024 is starting to look increasingly like a repeat of 2016, where we're not seeing a sharp drop in freight volumes, but we're also not seeing a rise, and so we're just going to keep moving along on a trough.
Thanks so much, Jason. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And that's just going to about wrap it up for this episode for us. But don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and get your copy of everything we covered today with the 30-day reset download. I've also got Strategize and consult links and forms down below. So if you'd like to dig into the numbers for yourself or just talk to one of our associates to see how we can help you meet your goals, let us know. Until next time, thanks for watching.